T-Mobile has America's largest 5G network, bigger than Verizon and AT&T's combined. And now, with T-Mobile's Best Go 5G plans, you get the freedom to upgrade your phone when you want. Every year or every two, you decide. Take charge of your phone upgrades at T-Mobile. Get the latest phones and an awesome network. Visit your neighborhood store or T-Mobile.com to make the switch. Get 2-year financing on Go 5G Plus and Next. 1-year upgrade on Go 5G Next requires financing new qualifying device and upgrading in good condition after 6+ months with 50% paid off. Upgrade ends any financing and promo credit. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey, welcome into the latest episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. World Series week has arrived. The Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers, two teams that won their respective league pennants 2 years after losing 100+ games each. Pretty amazing stuff. Pretty fun week across the baseball world this week. My name is Tyler Mon. Benjamin Hill is in New York City, and we are Samless this week. No Sam Dykstra. He's been abducted by aliens. No, I guess he's not feeling well today.
Yeah, that's the story.
That's the line.
Yeah.
Sure, Sam.
Yeah.
I noticed he didn't tell me. I logged on. You broke the news to me. So obviously he's shaky about his story, and he knew I was going to snuff it out. It's going to be like Perry Mason.
Yeah, I mean, Sam likes to gamble, and I think he went to the casinos. He's real big into canasta. I don't even know how to play canasta.
Sam learned from some. He's got a group of old ladies in Bay Ridge that he hangs out and plays canasta with.
Yeah, so I think he's on a roll with that. Pulled a canasta all nighter again, and no podcast for old Sam Dykstra today. So it's just you and me.
You're lost, Sam.
Have to gut through it.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us on this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. A little abbreviated episode with no Sam this week, but we're going to be talking about a very cool book, a minor league baseball book. We'll take a journey that way. That's coming up here in a little while. And we are going to talk a little bit about what's coming up on the major league landscape, which is obviously 2023 World Series, which is getting set to start this weekend. You can get in touch with us, podcast at MILB.com. Find us wherever you find your podcasts. Obviously, you found us if you're hearing this now. Give us a subscription and a rating and a review if you are so kind. Only good ones. That's all that we allow. And let's dive in, Ben. It is really kind of down to the last stories about the minor league regular season and championship season. You got a story on the site. Champions crowned across the minor leagues and how long it's been since each of those teams won a title. What were the droughts like in 2023? We have seen teams, in the last few seasons capture championships who have never captured championships before or have, waited decades since they did it. The team that really comes to mind over the last few years, the Charleston River Dogs, who had not won a title ever in their history, then just started rattling off titles in the post-Mill Reconstruction era. What about the 2023 champs across minor league baseball?
Yeah, this is a new article on the website and also, lead item in my newsletter. It's something I've done in previous years. I'm not here to analyze how these teams won the pennant or their key contributors or anything like that, but I like to put minor league baseball into a historical context. And as September was rolling along and we had, seemingly new league champions crowned every day, I was struck by wow, it's been a while since that team won. Wow, it's been a while since that team won. So I put it together in chronological order. First of all, there were two teams this year who had never won championships before. And this is probably the first time these two locales, are going to be mentioned, in the same breath. But the two first-time minor league champions in 2023 was the Eastern League, Erie Seawolves of Erie, Pennsylvania, and the Florida State League, Jupiter Hammerheads of, I guess, Jupiter, Florida, but they share the ballpark, as we've talked about on this podcast before, with the Palm Beach Cardinals. I'm not sure what the mailing address is, but Jupiter, Florida and Erie, Pennsylvania, united forever because in 2023, those were the two locales in which the minor league teams won for the first time. Erie was established in 1995 as a New York Penn League team, spent 4 years in that short season circuit, switched to the Eastern League in 1999, had never won. They got to the finals last year, but did not emerge triumphant. This year they got back and finally did it. So I was happy to see that too. And they did it over Binghamton. Not that I wanted Binghamton to lose, but Erie and Binghamton are two of the more smaller market, older ballpark franchises in the Eastern League. When the minor leagues were being reorganized prior to 2021, there was, some concern that neither of those teams, would maybe emerge from the restructuring. And the fact that they both did, and here they are meeting in the finals in 2023. I'm a champion of the underdog. So even putting aside the stories of the teams themselves, to me, there was something great about Binghamton and Erie meeting in the Eastern League Finals. And congrats to the Erie Seawolves getting their first ever champion. And of course, the Jupiter Hammerheads as well. They share that ballpark, Roger Dean Stadium, although this year they had moved jointly temporarily to ballpark of the Palm Beaches while renovations at Roger Dean were underway. But, Palm Beach had won twice through the years, and finally Jupiter got its own first champion. And they did it in the semifinal round by beating Palm Beach Cardinals. And if you listen to this podcast, which of course you do, and you're listening right now, we had Andrew Seymour, the Palm Beach Cardinals general manager, on a few weeks ago to talk about a playoff matchup against the team that you share a ballpark with. So something unique there. Another significant drought, Norfolk, Virginia, long running franchise, known as the Tidewater Tides for a lot of years, now the Norfolk Tides. They had not won since 1985. And, that's a long time.
That's the year of my birth. That's how long ago that was. I'm
ancient. So, now. Yeah. What month were you born again, Tyler?
June.
So
I predate the last championship for Norfolk, but not by much.
You do. So somewhere at the same moment in time, there was a 3-month-old Tyler Mon doing what a 3-month-old Tyler Mon does.
Yeah. Just reading books and, driving
and trying to tune into Norfolk, Virginia area radio to pick up
much more difficult in the pre-MILB streaming era.
Yeah, it was. But you were hey, you went on to be a broadcaster. You were into it at a long age, at a young age, I mean. And in 1985, the Tides were a Mets affiliate. So you look at that 1985 team and you see a lot of contributors on the 1986 world champion Mets. But the fact that they had gone that long, that was another big one. Elsewhere in AAA, Pacific Coast League, the Oklahoma City Dodgers won the championship, and Oklahoma City had not won since 1996. And so a bit of a drought there. And interesting in Oklahoma City is that they had never won a Pacific Coast League championship before. They played in the Pacific Coast League from 1963 to 1968, and then rejoined the circuit in 1998. But in the years between that, from 69 to 97, they were in the American Association, which went defunct after the 97 season, and the teams in that league, then got filtered into the PCL and International League. But Oklahoma City finally getting a Pacific Coast League championship. And, how apropos, because when you think Pacific Coast, I mean, what city comes to mind more so than Oklahoma City?
Whenever I think about gazing out from the cliffs over the Pacific Ocean, I do think no better place to do that than Oklahoma City. The PCL is so funny. PCL history is fascinating. And yeah, there used to be 3 AAA leagues. We've got stories up on that topic on the site at MILB.com from years past. Ben, before we talk about the World Series, and I know your team didn't make it through, and we're not going to belabor the point. We're not going to rub that in. I do want to ask you a question that was posed on the social media site formerly known as Twitter by the Somerset Patriots, who asked their players earlier this year, what is your least favorite Halloween candy? I'm going to go ahead and I don't know, maybe you're pro candy corn, but I'm going to remove candy corn from the discussion because it's like too obvious of an answer. What's your least favorite Halloween candy?
That's a good question. And we are really going into uncharted territory.
We are.
With the lack of Sam to rein us in, hitting these important topics. Just like this is like something that they talk about like on morning radio shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, hey, caller number 9, you're going to get 2 free tickets to see Cisco this weekend at the, whatever.
Cisco. Now the stations I listen to, it's like, you see like Jefferson Starship and Super.
That'd be a good show too. I'd
go. Sticks, some REO Speedwagon. But that's neither here nor there. Least favorite Halloween candy. It's funny. When I was a kid, I found coconut just disgusting.
I still do.
But I have evolved. I love
I have
coconut.
not. I have
Mounds,
not.
Almond Joy, all about it. But as a kid, those are the ones that it was just like, Mom, Dad, here you go.
Yeah.
Some absolute. I was like, why don't you put razor blades in my candy instead? I would have liked it better than this, this Almond Joy. But as I got older, I've grown to like coconut quite a bit. Of course, I have the qualifier with being gluten free. There's some candy that I cannot eat, but I'm just going to pretend I can eat everything. But least favorite, that's a question. Like, I'm going through it and I'm like, what now do I look at and just say like, ugh, no. Candy corn, I'm fine with it. I don't hate it like other people do, but I'm really coming up with a blank of like, oh, no way. So you provide your answer, Tyler.
I hadn't even really thought about like Mounds and Almond Joy, and those would definitely rank pretty high up. I have not evolved. I'm still like a 9-year-old. Like if I get Mounds or Almond Joy, I'm like, ugh, gross. It's weird though. Is like coconut. I'm okay with coconut as a flavor. I'm not okay with coconut as a texture. Like I can go drink a pina colada. I'm good with that. But the texture of coconut, I don't know what it is. So that's one. I also like and it's funny because my wife bought a bag of just like very lame candy. And I was like, we're going to be those people on the block who give out lame candy. And she was like, well, yeah, it's because we won't eat it. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. But A, that's lame. And B, we're going to be the, kids are going to go home. They're going to be like, oh, I got like lemon heads from the house on the corner. So like anything that's just, I'm way more of a chocolate person than I am like a fruit candy person, but ain't just like hard fruit candy or like a chalky fruit candy. Like I used to be fine with Smarties growing up. I'd still eat a little sleeve of Smarties, I'm sure, but like that's lame. Just give me a Milky Way. That's all I want. A Snickers or a Milky Way or a Reese's or something. I don't need any fruit candy. You can banish all of that. I'm fine with that. Except for Skittles. I love Skittles.
I'm still having trouble coming up with one I really dislike, but you and I diverge quite a bit there because I've always loved the kind of non-chocolate sour tangy candies.
Interesting.
Often around Halloween time I'll buy one of those, like they're often called like kitty packs, and I'm just like, I'm an adult, but with the Smarties, the lemon heads, nerds,
nerds I can be down with.
I like those quite a bit. When I was a kid and could buy my own candy, old enough to walk to the Ambler newsstand and buy my own candy, I was really into buying lemon heads, those 10-cent box of Jawbreakers that are now
Jawbreakers,
the Red Hots. Those were all made by a company named, I believe it's called Ferrara Pan, and no one ever references that brand name. And I'm like, they've been way too iconic. They make Red Hots, they make lemon heads. We need a little more Ferrara Pan awareness. Also, Just Born awareness. Just Born, based in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. They make Mike and Ike's and hot tamales and Peeps. Okay, that's
interesting crossover.
Easter candy, but there's like Halloween Peeps. That's one I would be like, no way.
Yeah, that's true.
But I do like Just Born candy. And when I was in high school, nowadays, okay, Sam's not here, so we're gonna go on a real tangent here. But
yes,
nowadays, Mike and Ike represents. There's several flavors of Mike and Ike's,
right?
But back in the day when I was growing up, Mike and Ike's were only just one type of candy. There was Mike and Ike's and just one type. And
just
then
Mike and Ike's original.
Yeah, original. And then there was like Jolly Joe, and that was grape. And there was Lemon Mel, which is like lemon and watermelon. And so there was all these like separate standalone candies that were like that. And one of them was Straw Banana. And a friend of mine, we were at lunch and bored one day, and we were just saying, how come we never see Straw Banana for sale? You can get the Lemon Mel, you can get the Jolly Joe, of course you can get the Mike and Ike's. And we wrote a letter to Just Born in kind of like snarky teenage way, and we're just like, we can't get Straw Banana anywhere. And Just Born sent us both a box filled with their candies, including Straw Banana. And that's why I'm talking about Just Born on this podcast, some 30 years later, because they really made an impression. They didn't have to do that. They did not have to send me a free box of candy. Just Born, based in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You sent me some free candy at some point in the 90s. And I'm shouting you out right now. You don't even need to sponsor this podcast. You get the free shout out.
Just the candy.
Yeah, Just Born. Good stuff. But man, Sweet Tart, Spree, Fun Dip. I'm a huge Fun Dip guy.
Huh.
Love the fun dip. Yeah.
Okay. The Somerset Patriots, the main answers, candy corn, obviously, almond joy, circus peanuts popped up. Circus peanuts are a weird candy. It's like that marshmallowy peanut. I don't even know if I've ever had that. Like, I think I would get that thing, or you get like that weird thing that's wrapped in like a wrapper that looks like a strawberry. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm not eating this. But there was also one Somerset Patriots player, and they don't have it captioned with the player's name, so I'm not sure who this was. Somebody said Butterfinger. What kind of monster? Who doesn't like Butterfinger? I guess this is, players nowadays, these kids today, they post date the Bart Simpson Nobody Better Lay a Finger on My Butterfinger ad campaign, which was instrumental in getting I feel like our generation to like Butterfingers. But what? Huh? Somebody says Three Musketeers, which I kind of get. There's like 3 tiers of candy bar from Mars. It's like Three Musketeers. It's like, how like Banana Republic, Gap, and Old Navy are all the same company. It's like Three Musketeers is the Old Navy because it's just chocolate and nougat, right? Then you add caramel, and that's Milky Way. And then you add peanuts, and that's Snickers. It's like those are the 3 levels of if you start making Snickers money in your life, things are going pretty well.
Well, Snickers is good. I also like with candy how there's still a lot of like clearly archaic names of candy bars, back from when candy bars were much more of a luxury, and it's just kind of like, it's payday. I'm going to walk around on Fifth Avenue and dance to Charleston and tip my cap to old Baby Ruth. A lot of this stuff goes back, quite some time. Like, we don't really candy making like pop culture references of today, which is an interesting thing to think. Like, if candy bars were a hot new fad, what would they be called today? Like
it would have to be like the billionaire instead of the $100,000,
Yeah, exactly.
$100,000 bars
with inflation. Well, $100,000 isn't anything. $100,000
is nothing now.
Yeah, they should rename to like 1.4 million or something.
Accounting for inflation for the name of the candy bar. You can get at us. You can send us your favorite and least favorite Halloween candy ideas at podcast@mylb.com. All right, Ben, before we pivot to our interview, it is World Series time. It is the Arizona Diamondbacks who knocked out your Philadelphia Phillies. Our apologies. And to be honest, our surprise. I don't think many people expected the D-backs to go on the road to Philly and win games 6 and 7. Texas Rangers go on the road to Houston. They win games 6 and 7. First time in MLB history that the road team has won both games 6 and 7 in the American League and National League Championship Series. What about these franchises and their minor league affiliates, the D-backs and the Texas Rangers? What are your favorite stops? What stand out about these? They're somewhat localized. There's a very Texas/Southwest-ish flavor to these systems for the most part, I guess, kind of. They've got affiliates elsewhere also, but there's a Texas influence there. What do you like about the D-backs and Rangers systems?
Yeah, well, the Rangers, obviously they have a Texas presence in their minor league system, AAA Round Rock Express, AA Frisco Rough Riders. But then from there, it deviates to North Carolina, the Hickory Crawdads and the Down East Wood Ducks. So weird Texas-North Carolina split in the Rangers system. And not just a split by state, but kind of a split by field too. Those higher level teams, are newer ballparks, but much more state of the art, for lack of a better word, ballpark experience. While Hickory and Down East are a little more down home, particularly Down East, Kinston, North Carolina, Granger Stadium. That's one of the oldest ballparks in minor league baseball. Its days are numbered. I know there's plans in the works for them to move elsewhere. I'm not sure how far along that is at the moment, but if you want to go see a game at Granger Stadium, I would recommend doing that next season for sure, just to guarantee that you get to see it. That's an old covered grandstand built in like 1949. Kinston itself is a small town, so I always have a soft spot in my heart for those kind of locales. And but good diversity in that system in terms of the different ballparks. I went to Round Rock last year, and just outside of Austin, and that's just a spectacular baseball experience. Great food, plenty of room to walk around. Same thing with Frisco. I mean, teams that do it up Texas style, Texas sized. And Arizona Diamondbacks, what do we got with them? We've got the Reno Aces in AAA, Amarillo Sod Poodles in AA, Hillsboro Hops in High A, and Visalia Rawhide. I mean, it'd be tough just based on like which teams
That is a really good collection. Those are two really good collections of minor league teams.
They are. So like which one like would I choose based on like the quartet of minor league locales I'd like to visit? That's a really tough decision. I'd probably give the edge to Texas just because especially because of down east, wanting to visit a historical ballpark, but Visalia, even older than Granger Stadium, and that's a real like small market, classic historical ballpark to go visit. I was in Hillsborough this past year, really fun place to see a game, larger Portland market, so they do things up, really well and draw really well for a team at their level because they can draw on, the larger Portland market. Amarillo, just so much energy and excitement there on a baseball fan level. That team debuted in 2019, became a D-backs affiliate in 2021. They won the Texas League Championship this year. And Reno's an interesting place because Reno's an interesting city. It's what do they call it? The biggest little city in the world. A lot of casinos by the ballpark, a lot of that downtown Nevada nightlife. So a really interesting place to visit. Not a place I'd necessarily want to live, but it's hard to judge a tourist area by as compared to actually living there, because there's a lot of natural beauty in that area. And there might be a lot more to Reno than what I've seen, but it is a fun place to visit, especially if you like to gamble like Sam Dykstra and hit the canasta.
We do know your secrets, Sam. We know why you're not actually. You thought he said, "Oh, I feel nasty today," but he really said, "I've got canasta today."
He said, I'm feeling canasty.
All right, Ben, well, tell us about our interview subject coming up this week. It's actually kind of fitting. I had to duck out of our interview after ducking in late. I had to immediately leave because I had a broadcast prep interview that the timing and scheduling had gotten screwed up. So I jumped in for like 3 minutes of our call and then immediately had to dive out. And it'll make sense when you explain our conversation this week.
Yeah, we had a Tyler Mon cameo in this interview, but the individual we were talking to, that I was mostly talking to because Tyler was otherwise engaged, but John Kocsis, the broadcaster for the Columbia Fireflies, author of a new book about minor league baseball broadcasters and their stories and their experiences. The book is called Play by Play from the Minors. We'll get into all that with John, and even the fact that I had something to do with this book in a small way. So everything comes back around to self-interest a little bit, but no, it's a great book. And if you're a minor league baseball fan, you'll enjoy reading it. Before we throw to that interview, Sam Dykstra, we do miss you. You can see that we're struggling without you. But we got through it, Tyler. We got through it.
We did. I thought it was pretty good.
I thought it was great.
Let's turn it over to John. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks. Here's a $100,000 interview.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Here on the Show Before the Show podcast, we are joined by John Kocsis, the broadcaster for the Columbia Fireflies and also author of the new book, which I'm holding up for a screen that you cannot see on a podcast, but Play by Play from the Minors, subtitled Profiles of Baseball Broadcasters from Scranton to Yakima. And I appreciate that he got Yakima there in the subtitle. A more obscure baseball location, Yakima, Washington. That team moved to Hillsborough in 2013. And as I always like to point out, Yakima produces way more hops than the Hillsborough region does, but yet they name their team the Hops once they move from Yakima. Great irony. But here I am rambling. Let's get to the guest. John, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Absolute pleasure to come on the podcast for the first time as an individual as opposed to a team.
Yeah. You've made different appearances or behind the scene appearances in the past, but we get our first one-on-one. And I want to dive into this book that just came out earlier this month. But first, let's learn a little bit about you, so then we have a little bit more context for the book. You are obviously, like I said, the broadcaster for the Fireflies, but you've been around the minor leagues for a little while now. Tell us about you and your career path so far.
Yeah, I started in West Virginia with the Power, now the Dirty Birds, back in 2017 as a video production intern. And then in 2018, got to be the video production manager as well as the broadcasting intern at the same time for the same team. And then in 2019, I started I guess, the full-time job of being a broadcaster. I became Hagerstown's lead broadcaster in the final season of the Suns. And then in February of 2020, I moved here to Columbia right before the world ended. And fortunately, it didn't take me out. I was able to stick around, and here we are a couple of years later.
Excellent. Yeah, nice to see you find a more of a long-term home in Columbia. Yeah, we last crossed paths, I believe, at a ballpark in Hagerstown, going up that spiral staircase to the press box that was on top of the roof. A memorable baseball environment, and one that sadly does not exist anymore. Not just the Hagerstown Suns, but that entire ballpark has been torn down. So glad you've gotten to get a taste of the variety of different minor league ballparks, because you have a much newer feel there with the Columbia Fireflies, to say the least.
Yeah, it really gives you an appreciation for what we have in Columbia after seeing kind of the facilities that were built in Hagerstown, and I think it was like 1932 or something. It was right around the Depression era. And what's kind of funny about coming to Columbia is, the Fireflies are a relatively new team from 2016 when they built their stadium. Prior to that, they played at Capital City Stadium as the Bombers. And that stadium was built around the same time as Hagerstown. And I believe it's still standing over by the fairgrounds. They've had plans to make it into a lot of things over years, Walmart, apartment complexes, but it still stands as an abandoned ballpark. So you kind of get to see the different stages of life of some of those older stadiums. And it really, again, gives you an appreciation for the fine facility we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of you and your career, did you always want to be a broadcaster? What was, you talked about the places you've worked so far, but what was your path to even get into the industry in the first place? And, growing up as a baseball fan, what made you want to get behind the mic and call games?
Yeah, so growing up, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I was born in the 90s. So I got to witness my first memories of sports were, Jim Thome, Kenny Lofton, Manny Ramirez, Carlos Baerga, Omar Vizquel, just those great Indians teams of the late 90s and early 2000s. And as a lefty from Cleveland, I wanted to be Jim Thome. When I was around 10, I figured I probably wasn't going to hit 600 home runs, and I had to find a new career path. So I looked at other things I was good at. I was really good at writing and reading. And for a while, I just wanted to be the next Chris Broussard or Ken Rosenthal. I wanted to be a writer. And then just push came to shove. I got different opportunities. My high school made it to the state basketball finals my junior and senior year. And I got to go on ESPN Cleveland, do an internship with them for a couple of weeks. And I said, wow, this broadcasting thing is pretty cool. So I started doing talk shows and stuff. And then in college, eventually became the voice of a summer collegiate team, the Southern Ohio Copperheads. And when I got that opportunity, I think that was 2014 or 2015, I traveled for the first time with a team of guys and got to tell their stories. And I said, this is it. Because at the end of the day, I went to school for journalism and had kind of envisioned in my mind that a journalist is just a professional storyteller. And this was, to me, the best way to tell different people's stories to a large group of people. So that's where I fell in love with, the play-by-play aspect of doing baseball.
Well, telling stories to a large group of people is what you do on a nightly basis with the Columbia Fireflies, but also you're doing that now in a different form. And you talked about how you wanted to be a writer also when you were growing up, and now you are a writer, a published author. This book, Play-by-Play from the Minors, is on McFarland Books. It profiles 13 minor league baseball broadcasters, or at least 13 broadcasters, about their minor league baseball experiences, starting with you and then a dozen others from around the industry. How did this book come about in terms of hitting on the concept and then selecting the broadcasters you wanted to profile, the writing process? I mean, it is a process, I know, putting something like this together.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So I wrote this initially during the pandemic. So I think it was around like March or April. And I said, well, I just moved to a new place. The world shut down. Let's just explore. And I started off and I was just looking at all the different parks in South Carolina, really. It was everything within 150 miles of Columbia that I wanted to explore. And then it was June, much later than the 3-week period they told us that COVID was going to last. And I said, oh, maybe I should try to do something. And I saw a lot of people were doing podcasts. I saw a lot of people were kind of doing all these different projects that were really cool. In fact, I have a twin. He started woodworking. He made everyone Christmas gifts out of wood that year. And so I ultimately thought, well, you know what? I've always wanted to write a book. Let's think of maybe something to write a book about. And Ben, I know you can kind of empathize with this, but I've had many a meal at a bar at 11 o'clock at night following a baseball game. And, you know, you sit down in a random city. I try to get new places I haven't been, or, you know, places unique to an area, you know, so you sit down and there's typically someone who's been there every night for their last 3 years. And they go, this is someone different. So they sit down to kind of talk with you. And they ask you all types of questions because what we do is relatively unique. So this was kind of a conglomeration of questions that people have asked me relatively routinely when I'm having that 11 o'clock dinner after a baseball game, or when I'm having that lunch at noon and I'm chatting with someone kind of about what I do because I'm wearing this weird logo on my chest instead of, you know, an Atlanta Braves logo, or, you know, like a bigger name logo that more people are familiar with. So it kind of came about by that. And then I just kind of kept expanding and expanding. As far as the people that are featured in it, it started off and I just wanted to reach out to people who I knew had written books before. So I reached out to Jesse Goldberg Strassler first over in Lansing. I spoke with Josh Sushan, and we kind of talked a little bit about his process to getting 3 books published and some recommendations for editing and stuff. And then I just had about hour-long phone calls with people and said, hey, would you mind if I, you know, chat with you and maybe wrote some of these things down for books? And what's crazy is the baseball community, as you know, is so giving and so amazing. You know, I spoke with someone and then they would recommend someone and they would connect me with someone. And so a lot of the people like Robert Ford, Joe Block are guys I didn't really know well or didn't know at all on a personal level. But then another broadcaster would come in and make that connection. And they said, oh, yeah, sure. I'd love to chat with you for an hour and hopefully, you know, have my stories told in your book. So it was really fun.
Yeah, and you know, Robert Ford, Joe Block are guys that are in the major league now. Jesse Goldberg Strassler has been with you know, Lansing for quite some time and is kind of the, I don't know what to call him, but one of the most well-known and most beloved broadcasters in the minor leagues, and a lot of other familiar names, maybe so to listeners of this podcast. You know, Adam Marco, who we've had on the show, is the you know, broadcaster for the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders. Alex Cohen with the Iowa Cubs, Emma Tiedemann with the Portland Sea Dogs, and so on and so forth. So you get a diverse range of perspectives and experience levels. For readers, what do you want them to take away from this book, or what do you think the main message or theme is that emerges in reading the profiles of these 13 individuals, including yourself?
I think there are a lot of things you can take away. One of the big ones for me as I wrote it was kind of how people get to the position of play-by-play broadcaster is so vastly different, right? Like Alex Cohen went halfway around the world to Australia and back to get there. Josh Sushan ended up going into writing for daily papers for 10 years between broadcasting jobs from where he started to Albuquerque. And I mean, Adam Marco was selling cars for a little bit. He did, you know, traffic reports in Charleston, West Virginia. There's no, you know, cut and dry. You go to a 4-year college, you do this specific internship, and then you're a major league broadcaster. It's very different. And then kind of traveling on the road, it's not your 9 to 5, right? You get to see a lot of crazy things. You get stuck on the side of the road on these buses, and then and you might be the best expert for this, but the promotions are truthfully unique wherever you may go. There are some really fun ones I had not heard of when I was writing this, and some I was familiar with, but are still fantastic stories to tell.
Yeah, a lot of fantastic stories in the book, and it's all preceded by a foreword by Benjamin Hill, myself. Appreciated your offer to write the foreword for the book. It was the first book foreword I've ever written. How many people said no to you before you got to me on the foreword list?
Well, I'd love to say that I you know, asked 20 or 30 people, but honestly, I mean, you're the guy. When I think of promotions in minor league baseball, or when I think of the business of baseball as a whole, you kind of think of Ben's Biz, right? You go around and you show people new ballparks and you show them what you could eat at ballparks, and you show them the crazy promotions. I'm pretty sure you came out to West Virginia at one point for one of the redneck nights, which is featured in the book in Adam Marco's chapter. So just a lot of really cool stuff that intersects between your Ben's Biz blog and now Twitter, and how it's kind of taken the podcast form and Major League Baseball's website, et cetera, and the book.
Yeah, I did go to the West Virginia Power. I believe that was 2015. It wasn't a redneck night, but it was really memorable. They had the wrestler Mick Foley, a Mankind, at the ballpark. And they put me up against Mick Foley in a karaoke contest between innings. And I was made to be like the heel in that contest. And I really, afterwards, I was like, okay, send me the video. And something went wrong and the video never existed. And I was like, really? I got in a karaoke battle with Mick Foley for nothing? But no, it wasn't for nothing. It was a great experience. Also, on this call, we have been joined a little bit belatedly, a broadcaster who had his own previous broadcasting obligations before he could join us, former minor league baseball broadcaster, and of course, current man about the globe, Tyler Maughan. Not putting you on the spot, Tyler, but if you want to chime in at any point, with any questions for John as a fellow broadcaster, of course, please do so.
I did jump in a little late, but John, what's been the response from the kind of community of broadcasters as you've gotten to the point where you get to put something like this together? And it's so everybody's always so interested to hear everyone else's story. It's really cool.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. And honestly, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I can't tell you, I was telling Ben earlier about how the chapter selection started off with just like 2 or 3 people I knew, but then everyone was like, oh, you got to get this guy's story, or you got to get this person's story, or this person's story. So it just kind of became a like connection chain of who thought someone would have great stories for the book for, and then we profiled them. But then even people that weren't featured in the book, because ultimately you only have so many words that you can put in there, once they heard that it was kind of becoming a reality or something, they would reach out and they go, oh man, this is such a cool idea. I can't believe someone else hasn't thought of doing something like this before. Or, hey, how can I support it? Or can I tell you some stories so that way you can use it as like a social piece to kind of advertise for the book after you get it out. So there's been just so much positive stuff to come from the community of broadcasters. And then beyond that, I mean, general managers, presidents, executives in baseball who have reached out as well.
And this book is being released by, or not being released, has been, past tense, the book is out, by McFarland Books. What was the process in terms of, getting it published and out into the world?
Well, what was funny was I had originally written, I think, the magic number that I had looked up, and there's no exact science to a Google search, but I said, how long does a novel have to be? And I remember the first publisher I emailed, I had written novel in there, and they said, well, novel is actually strictly a work of fiction. So are these fake stories? And I said, no, these are real stories. They said, okay, so it's a nonfiction book. But I think the average length was like 70,000 to 100,000 words. So I said, all right, sweet, 80,000 sounds like a great number. And I spoke with McFarland, who said they really wanted to buy it. They were super excited about it. And they said, but we want you to add 10,000 words to it. So I had written it, I edited it, pushed it along to a couple of friends to see what they thought and like ways to kind of trim it and make it more digestible. And then I go to McFarland and they say, okay, let's get 10,000 more words. So after roughly a year from finishing the final words of it to getting it kind of into a publisher's hand that wanted to purchase it, then I had to get back into writing mode, and I wrote 2 more chapters and interviewed a couple more people. But after that, I mean, the process was interesting because I'd never been through it. So there were forms I needed to fill out in retrospect. So I had to reach out to all 13 people, and you have to approve like what the cover looks like, for example, was something I'd never thought about. I was just, oh, that's something that just someone does, and you're kind of stuck with it. But that was kind of a fun little process to go through. And there's even stuff like, how do you want your name to appear on it? You know, you don't think about, like, they were like, do you want a comma before the junior? Or do you want a period after the junior? Stuff like that. So a lot more stuff that I learned about as we went on. And now we're talking about marketing and doing book signings and things like that to push it out now that it's out. But I feel like the process over the course of now almost 3 years, is very different than I thought. I figured the hardest thing was probably going to be writing it. And then after that, it was going to take care of itself. But I think in retrospect, editing was probably the longest part of the process.
Yeah, it is a process, and congratulations on getting it all out there. Where can people find the book, or where would you direct them optimally to purchase this?
So what's great is there are tons of different spaces where you can get it. Amazon is probably the easiest because everyone's already got their Prime membership or whatever, and you just have to look up play-by-play from the Miners or my name, and it's the first thing that pops up. But I understand like a lot of people are part of the Books A Million or the Barnes and Noble book clubs, and they get discounts. So it's available online for Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, and it's in select stores for both of those. But unless you're living in like Columbia, South Carolina, or near where I lived in Cleveland, Ohio, those are kind of where they are right now. It might expand kind of as things get going, but online, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, and then wherever books are sold digitally. I saw something on AIDS Books already, and I said, man, it's only been out for 2 weeks and it's already on a used bookstore. That's interesting. So just like different things that you don't expect about it. I've been looking to see updates on which libraries it's in because I had to submit a bunch of forms to different like county public libraries and stuff. And right now it's only in the Library of Congress, but I do have forms that say it's going to be in libraries in I think 15 different states, mostly on the East Coast. So might be at your local library too.
All right. Well, a lot of options to check out the book, and hopefully more and more as the days, weeks, and months roll on. To close, John, moving away from the book, but we are here in, later in the month of October. A question I get, a question anyone who works in baseball gets is like, what do you do in the off season? So outside of talking to me and doing podcast interviews, what are you doing in this off season as the broadcaster for the Columbia Fireflies?
Yeah, so right now we're into the stage of starting to sell corporate sales for the 2024 season. So this last week I talked to a couple local colleges and lawyers and have kind of put out some proposals for them. That's kind of the sales part to it. I think the interesting part for people is that Columbia does something relatively unique in that we've got the Fireflies holiday lights each year. So at the end of last week, we had these basically the back of a semi-truck shipping containers filled with Christmas lights. And in the middle of October, we decided, all right, we're going to unpack those and start hanging them up within the stadium. And as I kind of look through my office window right now, I can see the light poles along our concourse that you walk along. And right now they've got garlands strung up around with big red bows. I can look at the bathrooms in center field and there are string lights down over them. The seating bowl's covered in lights right now too. And basically we're just missing the 40-foot tall Christmas tree that'll be in left field and some of the larger frames that'll be on the field. But hard to believe, but in about 2.5 weeks, we're going to have Christmas lights and, Mariah Carey or Johnny Mathis or any of those other Christmas classics playing here at Segra Park.
Yeah, never a dull moment in minor league baseball, even in the off season. Despite what the outside world might think, there's always something going on, including writing books in some cases. So play-by-play from the minors, profiles of baseball broadcasters from Scranton to Yakima by John Kocsis, available wherever books are sold. Let's just put it that way. John, thanks so much for being on the Show Before the Show podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Really appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by M&M's. Fun is everywhere, a universal language of smiles, laughter, and sharing. So embrace it with the iconic candy brand that has been built on bringing people together with its colorful, bite-sized chocolate candies. M&M's, available in milk chocolate, peanut butter, minis, and more. There's an M&M's flavor to suit everyone's taste. M&M's, for all fun kind. Visit MMS.com to buy now.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Miners. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the the minors, in which all of you out there in Radioland must identify the legitimate historical ball club or player hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One entertained on the diamond for several years. The others never even showed up. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball teams did at one time exist. A. The Rain Rice Birds. B. The Wayne Wheat Wolves. C. The Cane Corn Crows. There's more than a grain of truth to your answer if you picked A. The Rain Rice Birds, who flocked to the fields for pieces of 3 decades in 2 separate iterations. The club was the pride of Rain, Louisiana, about 130 miles west-northwest from New Orleans as the Crow Flies, with the Rice Birds playing in the Louisiana State League of 1920 and the Evangeline League of 1935 to 41. Rain is known today as the frog capital of the world, but in the late 19th century, as the wet prairie lands of southwestern Louisiana were cultivated into rice fields, it was the site of a major piece of economic infrastructure for the region, the Rain Rice Mill, which opened in 1888 and was renamed the Acadia Rice Milling Company a couple years later. The phrase rice birds can refer to any number of species of birds that feed in grain fields, but in Louisiana in the early 20th century, the moniker was almost certainly used to refer to the bobolink, whose appearance in great numbers in the springtime was allegedly said to portend a bad harvest for the season. And the inaugural Rice Birds Ball Club had a very bad harvest indeed for the 1920 season. That Rain team fell down relentlessly, going 30-33 until it precipitated right out of the league on July 6th, taking with it the New Iberia Sugar Boys, who actually had a pretty sweet record at 36-25. 11 days later, the whole league collapsed. But you can't keep a good rain down, and the minors reigned again in Rain in 1934 with the advent of the Rain Red Sox, who joined the new Evangeline League as an affiliate of, well, you guessed it. But in 35, the Rice Birds name took flight again, as Class D Rain had a new working agreement with Class A Dallas, which in turn operated in the White Sox system. Although the parent club would change, the Rice Birds kept both feet on the ground until the Evangeline League, like many minor circuits, went on hiatus for the war in 1942. Over the course of those 7 seasons, the Rice Birds had some clubs that really soared, although none of them won a title. In 37, Rain stayed above the waterline with the management of Harold Funk and the hitting of Frank Huska and future big leaguer Ken Silvestri, who led the Loop with 23 homers and 123 RBIs, and great pitching from George Gick, who posted a circuit-best 2.41 ERA. It was enough for them to tie with Lafayette for first place at 73-41, but Lafayette starved the Rice Birds in the playoffs. By the time the war came around, Rain fans could be forgiven for thinking baseball was for the birds and not for the Rice Birds. The club was 37-95 in 40 and 20-69 in 41. When in Rain, it poured. And that's how the Rain Club went down the drain. Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these players could really cha-cha-cha in the minors of yesteryear? A. Chester Chatham. B. Charlie Chapman. C. Chaz Channing. Want to know the answer? Chew on it. Or tune into the next Ghost of the Minors. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is getting ready for the World Series, and he wants me to throw BP.
That'll do it for this week's episode of the show before the show. I don't know. Goodbye. Thanks, Sam, for nothing. No, I'm kidding. Ben, we're headed into game 1 of the World Series. You got a pick? You got a pick for us? Rangers, D-backs? What are you going with?
Hey, I'm biased, but after seeing the Diamondbacks beat the Phillies, I feel like they can beat anybody. So I'm going with the Diamondbacks. But in 7, it's going to be back and forth. But I just feel like this weirdo chaos Diamondbacks team, they cannot be denied. But hey, that's because I've seen a lot more than that I've seen the Rangers watching them. watching this NLCS quite intently. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. Now that I'm not really as emotionally invested as a fan, it's still the World Series, and I look forward to it. And it was not a relief to see my team eliminated, but now it's just like a little more casual.
It is true. Like your anxiety level drops 1,000 times when your team is out of it, which thankfully for me, my team's never in it. So that makes it really easy. I have a good cop-out answer, which is just that I always cheer for Game 7 at this point in the season. Like I want as much baseball for as long as possible. I do think this is going to be a really good series. Not two teams that people are probably that familiar with before the season and even into the playoffs, but these are two really good teams and two teams that play an exciting brand of baseball. And I'm excited to see what the D-backs and the Rangers have in store for us as the 2023 World Series gets rolling. Ben, what do you got coming up to the site? What's next?
Just like the last couple of weeks, of course, the newsletter is still coming out with standalone features, and please subscribe to the Ben's Biz Beat newsletter. If you have any questions on how to subscribe, it's on my main Twitter profile at Ben's Biz, or just email me at benjamin.hill@mlb.com. Anyway, I've still got road trip stuff coming up. I'm working on a story right now. Actually, it's done about a man named Marvin Dill, who has worked for the Columbus Clippers going back to the days of the Columbus Jets in 1967. He spent 30-some years as a visiting clubhouse manager. So talked to him about his time with the team and why he's still there today and how much it's meant to him. I have a story about a guy named Max Oxley who is British and he's just out of college, but he's working for the Louisville Bats. He fell in love with baseball on a trip to America with his family, and they saw a Yankees game and it just turned his whole life around. So I talked to him about his career journey. We can get into those articles at a later date, but I'm just justifying this to myself. I've still been working. I've still got stuff coming out there, but October is, as we've mentioned many times, kind of a strange month. Baseball's everywhere in the postseason, but in the minors, you're in this kind of transitional time, and you just kind of have to get through it and know that you're doing a good job. And even if you're just talking about your favorite Halloween candies and slandering your absent co-host, things are going okay.
Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Show Before the Show. Huge thanks to Josh Jackson for Ghosts and for Benjamin Hill. My name is Tyler Ron. Sam, feel better. Enjoy Atlantic City. We'll catch you next week.